you know, constant and overwhelming commercial imperative as you do find in a novel when you're writing a novel, I think.
Each story has an entirely different voice. You kind of think, where did this come from? You know, how can you write like this? And I think the first story and the last story are particularly kind of amazingly realised. They're really polished, exceptional writing, I'd say.
What short stories can do that novels can't, I guess, is in many ways the stakes are higher. You know, you have less space, you're still meant to affect the same emotional chords and consequences in your readers, and there's just less room for error. So the stakes are higher, you're walking a tightrope, and I find that really challenging. I find that quite exhilarating, actually, that you can play with time, you can play with character and scene, and get something across that's larger than you and smarter than you, but you really can't screw up, because once you do, you know, you've lost your reader. Louise is sitting on the old colonial wall and looking out toward the ocean. And then, as the sun rises higher on your right, you can see that each black shape is a man. There are hundreds of them, and they are hauling one enormous fishing net in from the ocean.
This is a prize given in the name of someone who at a very young age wrote some of the most remarkable short stories and poetry in the English language. So, you know, the bar is set very high, and to find somebody to give it to whom you're thrilled about is wonderful.
The charismatic poet Dylan Thomas, who's been an inspiration to so many, was portrayed by Matthew Rhys in the eagerly anticipated film The Edge of Love, released in June this year.
If I can get all my friends to donate $5 bob each, this is the plan. If I get them all to do that, then I don't have to sell my soul writing bloody propaganda films. I can write my bloody poetry.
You'd have to join the army.
The two feisty women in his life are played by Sienna Miller and Keira Knightley. It isn't a biopic in the traditional sense, rather a story about the complex intimacies between two young couples whose love and lives are so dangerously intertwined.
I'll give you a snout, Dylan Thomas. That's what you'll get from me.
Oh.
I do think, you know, you probably wanted to see a bit more of Dylan Thomas, Matthew Rhys. He was absolutely delightful. A lot of people thought he probably was a bit of a schemer, you know, he was horrible. But I think there was a bit of odd charm, a boyish charm that he brought to it as well, despite the fact that you knew you were supposed to dislike him and what he was doing. But I don't know if that was somewhat misplaced, because, you know, he was the central character in terms of what their issues were. And so you probably wanted to see a lot more of him.
Still the light of your life, am I?
In the New Forest, is he?
What are you asking for, Dylan? You know damn well our son's with my mother.
I love him.
Sienna Miller as Caitlin was brilliant. I mean, she really brought a lot of depth to that role. You know, the ups and downs and the complexities of what this woman was going through really were represented very, very well.
Maybe that is why they kissed me.
Keira Knightley, in terms of the performance, I think it was just solid, but not necessarily the thing that stole the show. I think it was definitely Matthew Rhys and Sienna Miller that did the work there.
So great.
The long-awaited film I Know You Know from human traffic director Justin Kerrigan was released in November.
Okay?
Yeah.
Everything all right?
Yeah.
I Know You Know is about a 12-year-old boy who believes his father's working undercover. His father and son on a mission. It's Robert Carlyle and a 12-year-old boy who's never acted before.
Why have you got a gun?
It's based on something that happened to me, my father, in the 80s. It was something that completely changed my life, actually. And a few months after Human Traffic came out, my dad died, and I basically had to make this film.
I know that Justin Kerrigan's film came out of his own personal grief with his father, but certainly, you know, what you enjoyed about it was that through the eyes of this little boy, you could follow him, and it wasn't so much about grief, but you actually could hold on to the story and not sort of wallow in the sort of pain that the story emerged out of. And that worked really well, so that the audience wasn't bogged down in the emotion of it.
Where are we going? What's going on, Charlie?
All right, now listen, Jay. We've got some very important business to take care of tonight. So I need you to be cool and Don't ask questions if you're going to come with me, all right?
All right.
It's so much more than a film to me, and it's something that I had to do, not just as a filmmaker, but as a son.
Despite all the freedom of being a writer-director, you still have to be able to take the criticism in and sometimes rein in that need to show how deeply personal this piece is to you and think about the commercial values as well. And I think certainly in the case of Justin Kerrigan, it was a deeply personal piece, but yes, still it was a great story. So you didn't get that self-indulgence of, you know, that mistake that sometimes young writer-directors have of being totally self-indulgent about really getting into every minute detail that maybe the audience doesn't need to know. Nice, linear, all the fat was trimmed off of it, and it worked really well.
And in another Welsh film, Mackenzie Crook plays Comet Snape, a young man who steals a grandfather clock and sets off to bring it back to his dying father in West Wales, in Abraham's Point, written and directed by Wyndham Price, with music from Welsh composer John Hardy.
I wanted the film to be uplifting. I didn't want it to be a downbeat, miserable social realist film, because it's not. It contains surreality, it contains myth, and it contains a spiritual dimension which I wanted to convey to the audience.
Visually, beautiful. I mean, you know, you had scenes from the Brecon Beacons, the Vale of Glamorgan, the Pembrokeshire coast. So there was so much to see and so much to feed off of. Beautiful soundtrack, you know, mix of country and western to classical music. So the senses were all there. And so in the end, as a whole, it worked really well. In terms of a story, it was quite interesting. I think it did sag a bit in points, definitely, but Mackenzie Crook was engaging. You know, he maintained that sort of troubled man throughout. And certainly Joseph Milford really livened up things, and I think that sort of almost saved it, because there was a point at which you sort of thought, okay, this is going to dip a bit, and where are we going with this? But certainly, you know, that made you engage with it even more, and it sort of gave you that counterpoint between, you know, Mackenzie Crook and his troubles and Joseph Milford and his gay abandon, and that really, really worked.
Oh, like that, mate. It's only a joke. Woo. How amazing is this? What? Woo!
In the world of classical music, soprano Rebecca Evans has had one of her most successful years to date. But it's for her recording of Gretel in Humperdinck's Hansel and Gretel with conductor Sir Charles